chief of staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell. Look him up. He's a famous man. He's since taught courses at a couple of famous universities. Here's what Wilkerson said.
If Trump calls his base to the streets with their guns, his base owns something like 60 to 70% of the 300, 400 million guns in America. If they answer that call and come to the streets with guns, then we probably are going to have a need for the military. And then all bets are off as to how much blood might flow.
How much blood might flow? So here you have one of the people who brought you the war in Iraq fantasizing out loud about killing even more civilians, in this case, American citizens, Trump voters, in the streets of our cities. People didn't used to talk like this on television, and on Fox News they still don't because we wouldn't allow it. That's violent extremism. But on that channel, no problem. No one even noticed that. Tells you a lot about how they think. You really can't overstate, and we mean that, you can't overstate how corrosive language like that is. It's a quick way to break everything, and it's happening now. Normal people are becoming paranoid. Americans who love this country are beginning to fear it. Why? We know exactly why. Because shutting down legitimate discourse and inquiry always has that effect. It destroys social trust, and it sets the table for awful things to come. So let's stop this right now. Slow down. No hasty calls. Our system works. It has worked before. If people air concerns, resolve the concerns. Don't call them names. Don't sweep those concerns under the rug. Don't shut it down artificially with unelected news anchors. Let our system work. Only by doing that will we have a country we're going to want to live in 20 years from now. Josh Hawley is a Republican senator from the state of Missouri, and we're happy to have him on tonight. Senator, thanks so much for coming on. So I'm concerned by the number of reports that we are getting on this channel, that I'm getting, that all of us are getting about irregularities and potential fraud in the voting. I can't confirm that any of those are true. Perhaps some are. What I'm concerned about is the concerted attempt to ignore them and the effect that that has on Americans' trust in the system.
Yeah, I am too, Tucker. There needs to be transparency in this process. There needs
Yes.
to be integrity. Americans need to have confidence that their elections have integrity. And that means things like poll watchers. Poll watchers from both parties need to be present as ballots are being counted. That means that states need to give an accounting of how many absentee ballots they have left, how many mail-in ballots are there. It also means things like ballot harvesting, Tucker, where you pay a third party to go collect ballots and bring them in. That ought to be illegal in the United States of America. Let's ban ballot harvesting right now. It is rife with abuse. It is inviting abuse. These are the kind of reforms that we need to pursue. But right now, I mean, right this very instant, there needs to be total transparency in this process. And I got to tell you, when you see some states going to court to try and stop poll watchers, people just observing the ballot counts, I mean, that is deeply, deeply disturbing.
Well, it is disturbing. And I can't really think of a reason for it that's legitimate. But I know for a fact, but hopefully the system, the courts will figure this out. But I know for a fact that the effect of it is to make everyone paranoid and distrustful. Why are they allowed to get away with excluding oversight? That seems like a disastrous thing even to try.
Yeah, it does, and unfortunately we've seen it tried in multiple places. I mean, you've seen reports out of Detroit about ballots brought in there, new ballots in the middle of the night. We've seen it in Philadelphia. Now, again, to your point a second ago, I don't know if these allegations are well-founded or not. That's why you have observers. That's why you have a process. That's why you have a transparent process. I can tell you what else, Tucker, to have some states where they're not even telling us how many ballots they've counted, how many exactly are left. They're not giving reports. So they say, we'll get back to you in 24 hours. They're completely dark. That also breeds distrust. People have no idea what in the world is going on. So I say again, there needs to be total transparency in this process. Allow poll watchers to come in from both parties. States should be giving regular updates so the American people can have confidence. And going forward, we're going to have to pursue election integrity reforms.
Yeah, immediately. I mean, when people refuse to answer straightforward questions, when they refuse to allow you to watch what they're doing, you should be highly concerned, and that's why people are concerned. It's not a figment of their imagination. I have to ask you, several months ago, Democrats completely redid the way we vote for president. for hundreds of years, we've allowed people who need absentee ballots to request them and then vote with them. But states sent the entire voter file ballots. Wasn't that, under the best of circumstances, a recipe for undermining the public's faith in an election outcome?
Yeah, particularly when then you allow ballot harvesting, which is you send all those mail ballots out, and then it's legal in many states to allow third parties to pay third parties to go round the ballots up and bring them to the ballot box. I mean, that is begging for voter abuse. It's just begging for it. That should be banned. Right. We should ban that. Right. And again, this practice of just mailing the list when there's no ballots requested, somebody doesn't request a ballot, you just send it to them. That also, I think, has a lot of serious issues. So at the very least, let's start by banning ballot harvesting. Congress should do that immediately. Senate is back in session next week. We ought to take this up next week, immediately.
Yeah. So the left sets up a system that is guaranteed to shake the public's faith in an election outcome and then punishes anyone who questions the election outcome. Boy, they got you coming and going here, I have to say. Senator, good luck on that bill. We're rooting for you.
Thank you.
So we are going to do our absolute dead level best, because we care about the country, not to incite paranoia or fear. But we're going to be as honest as we possibly can about what we're seeing, because that's our obligation. On election night, early returns show that the president has a significant lead in the states of Georgia and Pennsylvania. 2 days later, we are still counting votes and awaiting the results in those states. Why? Why did a bunch of different states shut down voting on election night? These aren't crackpot questions. These are totally legitimate questions, and most people have not heard the answers. Michael Anton has written a fantastic column on this topic. He's the author of The Stakes, America at the Point of No Return. We're happy to have him on tonight. Michael Anton, thanks so much for coming on. You're, among other things, a historian. I know that you care about our system more than any single politician. All of us, I think, should feel that way. It does seem like people have legitimate concerns about whether the system is working fairly. Tell us what your concerns are.
Some of the ones that you mentioned. Why was voting stopped in 5 or 6 states? I think it was actually 5 states and 6 cities for 4 hours. You know, why are ballots showing up? Mail-in voting, it has a lot of problems. Some obvious ones. You send ballots out to everyone. You never know who actually receives the ballot. And when they come back, you could be sending them to people who've died without knowing it. You could be sending them to people who've moved from the state. So that already has a problem. But there should be one advantage, right? If these things are mailed in, presumably, some of them will come in late, but wouldn't most of them be coming in months or weeks ahead of time? So why are we finding big tranches of ballots hours and in some cases even more days after the polls have closed? Shouldn't mail-in ballots already be there somewhere ready to be counted? And your point is exactly the right one. These are questions. They deserve investigations and answers, transparent answers. And when all we get back is, shut up, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're attacking the integrity of our democracy, that doesn't give anybody confidence in the integrity of the system. It makes you suspect that something fishy is going on.
Well, I mean, I would say that censorship and silencing legitimate questions is itself an effort to undermine the legitimacy of our democracy. Who's undermining the democracy? Right. Who's destroying the public's faith in the system? It's not us.
Right. No, definitely not. And look, I would say this, I think the person, ironically, one of the people who will be harmed by this, if this continues and this plays out the way it's looking right now, will be Joe Biden, to be perfectly honest. If I were Joe Biden, and I were convinced I won, comfortably or at least handily in a number of states, and an accurate count would show that, I would be saying to everyone in my party, everyone in my campaign, I would be saying this to all the state elected officials and non-elected officials who are in charge of vote counting: be transparent, be open. Let both sides examine this process and see what's going on, because I want the American people, the whole American electorate, including Donald Trump's 67 million voters, I want them all to be convinced that this was fair and that I won legitimately, so that I can govern with the full confidence of the American people in the system. That's what I would want if I were Joe Biden.
Well, because you care about having the confidence of the American people, because you believe in democracy. But people who believe in ruling by force don't really care what voters think, because they're going to make them obey regardless. And that's maybe the difference between you and them.
It suggests...
Go ahead, please finish.
Yeah. No, but it suggests that they must not have total confidence that if there were a completely fair count,
right,
and if all of these questions were addressed and the anomalies addressed, they must be worried that they wouldn't win. Otherwise, they would be throwing open the books and saying, you know, the president mentioned this and others have mentioned it. There are places where votes are being counted where they've literally taped paper in the windows so that people can't look inside. You know, people who think they won, that want a fair accounting, they wouldn't do that.
That's exactly right. Such a smart point. Michael Anton, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks.
Not to mention, didn't they spend 3 years telling us the last election was rigged by Vladimir Putin? And now they're attacking anyone who questions the legitimacy of the election? It's beyond belief. Well, the situation in Pennsylvania is still unfolding tonight. Votes are still being counted 2 days after the election. We'll speak to a poll watcher who's very concerned about what's happening there. You'll hear it straight